For decades, standard medical advice was, well, as simple as it was strict, right? Basically, eating saturated fat clogs your arteries. Like, it was the golden rule of nutrition.
Oh, absolutely. It was just an unquestioned fact for a long time.
Right. But what if a fat that's 94% saturated actually performed better at protecting your heart than, say, the 66% saturated fat that we were all told to swap it out for?
Yeah, it sounds crazy, but it really did upend a lot of foundational assumptions. I mean, we are dealing with an area of nutrition that has given the public absolute whiplash over the last 10 years or so, especially regarding how different fats behave inside the human body.
Totally. Well, welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to cut straight through that confusing, often contradictory noise about what you should actually be putting on your plate.
Which is much needed, honestly.
Because if you've walked down a grocery aisle recently, you've seen the confusion firsthand. We spent an entire generation aggressively avoiding saturated fats. And then, seemingly overnight, coconut oil, which is overwhelmingly saturated fat, just became this trendy health food.
It became ubiquitous. I mean, you saw it everywhere.
Yeah.
And the medical establishment definitely noticed the trend. In fact, back in 2017, the American Heart Association released this presidential advisory that pushed back hard on the coconut oil craze.
They explicitly advised against it, right?
They did, yeah. They explicitly advised against consuming it. And their reasoning followed the traditional textbook model of lipid transport. Basically, coconut oil is a saturated fat. Saturated fats downregulate the liver's ability to clear the bad LDL cholesterol from your blood, and high circulating LDL leads to heart disease.
So to them, the math was just settled.
Exactly. From their perspective, the biological math was settled. It's a saturated fat, ergo, it is bad for you.
But the reality of human biology is rarely that neat and tidy. Which brings us to the fascinating 2018 study published in the journal BMJ Open that we are unpacking today.
Right, the BBC study.
Yeah, exactly. And what makes this source material so compelling is that it wasn't just a group of scientists working in some sterile, perfectly controlled environment. It was a trial conducted in the UK in collaboration with the BBC's television program, Trust Me, I'm a Doctor.
Which is such a unique setup for a clinical trial.
It really is.
Yeah.
They pitted three heavyweights of the fat world, coconut oil, butter, and olive oil, against each other in a real-world setting. So, okay, let's unpack this. How exactly did the researchers structure this showdown without locking people in a lab?
Well, to understand why the study's findings are so disruptive, we first really need to understand that methodology. Historically, a lot of our foundational data on dietary fat comes from what are called metabolic ward studies.
And a metabolic ward is basically what, like a nutritional prison?
Basically, yeah. In a metabolic ward, participants are essentially confined to a clinical facility. Every single calorie, every gram of protein, fat, and carbohydrate is strictly measured and controlled by the researchers.
So they control everything.
Everything. It's highly precise, but it completely removes free will.
Right, because nobody actually lives in a metabolic ward. Like you and I live in the real world, where we go to restaurants, we grab snacks, we get stressed out and eat a donut.
Precisely. And this study moved from theoretical, highly controlled guidelines right to the kitchen counter. The researchers recruited 94 healthy volunteers from the general community in Cambridgeshire.
Okay, so just normal people.
Normal people. These were men and women aged 50 to 75, which, by the way, is a critical demographic because that is the age range where cardiovascular risk factors really start to manifest.
But they screened for a clean baseline, right? Like these participants had no known history of heart disease or diabetes.
Correct. And crucially, they couldn't be on any lipid-lowering medications like statins, because obviously that would skew the cholesterol data.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did they divide them up?
The volunteers were randomized into 3 groups. Each group was asked to consume 50 grams of a specific fat every single day for 4 weeks.
50 grams.
Yep. One group received extra virgin coconut oil, another got extra virgin olive oil, and the third got unsalted butter.
Okay, for some context for you listening, 50 grams of pure fat is roughly 3 tablespoons. That equates to about 450 calories a day, just of straight fat.
It's a significant amount, yeah.
And the instructions were just to, what, incorporate it into their normal everyday lives?
Exactly. They could use it as a cooking oil substitute, spread it on toast or whatever, but because 3 tablespoons is quite a lot of fat to just organically cook into a standard British diet.
You'd be swimming in it.
Right, so they could literally just eat it straight off the spoon like a daily supplement.
Oh, wow. And people actually did that.
Many participants opted to do just that to ensure they hit the dosage. They were given measuring tools and pre-packed portions to guarantee they hit that exact 50-gram target every day.
So they take their 3 tablespoons and then what?
Well, the researchers took comprehensive baseline measurements, first blood lipids, inflammatory markers, weight, waist circumference, and then they sent them out to just live their normal lives for a month before testing them again.
Okay, so before we get to the 4-week data, I think we really need to challenge the terminology the medical community has been using here.
You mean the umbrella term of saturated fats?
Yes. Grouping all saturated fats together simply because they lack double bonds in their chemical chain seems incredibly reductive to me.
It's a massive oversimplification.
Right. Lumping all saturated fats together feels like putting a sports car and a tractor in the same category just because they both have 4 wheels. I mean, they're going to drive very differently. Did the researchers design this study to test if the body processes these different fats in different ways?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the researchers fully expected the coconut oil to behave like the tractor. They thought it would just act like a typical saturated fat.
Really? They expected it to be bad.
Yeah. Their primary outcome measure, the main variable the trial was powered to detect, was the change in LDL-C. That is the low-density lipoprotein, which is widely recognized as the primary driver of arterial plaque buildup.
The bad cholesterol.
Exactly. Because coconut oil is so highly saturated, the working hypothesis was that it would significantly raise LDL cholesterol, essentially mirroring the physiological effects of the butter.
Because butter is like the classic villain in the dietary fat narrative.
Right. And when we look at the 4-week results, the butter group did exactly what the decades of previous metabolic ward studies predicted.
It raised the bad stuff.
It did. Consuming 50 grams of butter a day significantly raised their LDL cholesterol by 0.42 millimoles per liter compared to both the olive oil and coconut oil groups. It also negatively skewed their overall cholesterol ratio.
So the butter behaved precisely according to the standard model.
Yeah, it elevated the atherogenic particles, the particles that actively promote heart disease.
But here is the massive contradiction in the data. And this is the part that is just wild to me. Coconut oil is 94% saturated fat.
Right.
Butter is only 66% saturated fat. If we follow the standard logic that saturated fat directly downregulates LDL clearance, shouldn't the coconut oil have spiked the bad cholesterol even higher than the butter did?
You would logically assume that based on the broad chemical classification, sure. But the results completely defied that assumption.
What happened?
Not only did the coconut oil fail to significantly raise LDL cholesterol compared to extra virgin olive oil, which, is practically universally endorsed as the gold standard for a heart-healthy fat, but it initiated a completely different metabolic response.
Wait, really?
Yeah, coconut oil significantly raised HDL-C, the good cholesterol, compared to both the butter and the olive oil groups.
Okay, so the 94% saturated fat essentially tied with the heart-healthy olive oil in keeping the bad cholesterol managed, but actually outperformed olive oil in boosting the good cholesterol.
It did. It raised HDL by 0.18 millimoles per liter compared to butter, and by 0.16 compared to olive oil.
That is incredible.
And it is important to understand why HDL is considered beneficial. High-density lipoprotein acts like a biological cleanup crew in your veins.
Right, sweeping up the mess.
Exactly. It facilitates reverse cholesterol transport, pulling cholesterol molecules away from the arterial walls and transporting them back to the liver to be excreted.
So a higher HDL means a more efficient cleanup crew circulating in the blood. But the study didn't just stop at cholesterol levels, did it? I mean, they also tracked inflammatory markers.
Correct. Which brings us to C-reactive protein, or CRP.
CRP.
Yes. CRP is a protein synthesized by the liver, and it is one of our most reliable biomarkers for systemic inflammation.
And why does that matter for heart health?
Well, in the context of cardiovascular health, inflammation is essentially the spark that makes cholesterol dangerous. You can have LDL particles in your blood, but it is the inflammatory response that causes those particles to become oxidized, stick to the arterial walls, and form plaques.
Okay, so what happened to the systemic inflammation in the group eating 3 tablespoons of coconut oil a day?
The coconut oil group actually demonstrated a significant reduction in C-reactive protein compared to the olive oil group.
Wow, so we are talking about lower systemic inflammation, a highly efficient cleanup crew of good cholesterol, and no significant spike in bad cholesterol.
All resulting from a dietary fat that is 94% saturated, yes.
That effectively breaks the monolithic rule that all saturated fats are inherently harmful to cardiovascular biomarkers.
It really does. It shatters it.
So to understand the mechanism behind this, to explain exactly why your body reacted to the 94% saturated fat so differently than the 66% saturated butter, we have to look under the hood at the specific molecular structure.
Right, because when the FDA or a nutrition label uses the term saturated fat, they are aggregating a wide variety of fatty acids. But as your sports car and tractor analogy pointed out, the shape and length of the chemical chain dictates how the body actually handles it.
Okay, so what's the difference in the chains?
If we examine the fatty acid profile of butter, its saturated fat content is heavily dominated by palmitic acid, which makes up about 28%, along with stearic acid. And these are long-chain fatty acids.
Long chains.
Yeah.
Got it. And how does that contrast with the profile of the coconut oil?
The saturated fat in coconut oil is predominantly lauric acid, accounting for roughly 48% of the oil's composition. And critically, lauric acid is classified as a medium chain fatty acid.
Medium chain. Here's where it gets really interesting. I think an analogy about how we burn fuel might help visualize this mechanism.
Oh, definitely.
Think about building a fire. Lauric acid, the medium chain fat found in coconut oil, behaves a lot like kindling. It's light, it catches fire quickly, and it's burned for energy almost immediately.
Right, very efficient.
But palmitic acid, the long chain fat that dominates butter, is more like a dense, damp log. It takes a lot more effort to break down, and it tends to just sit there clogging up the fire pit.
That is a highly accurate way to conceptualize the metabolic pathways. Because lauric acid is a medium-chain fatty acid, its journey through human digestion takes a completely different route.
Where does the butter go first?
When you consume long-chain fatty acids like those in butter, they are literally too large to pass directly into the bloodstream. They have to be packaged into particles called chylomicrons.
Chylomicrons.
Yes, and those have to travel through the lymphatic system before eventually being emptied into your bloodstream. This is the pathway that ultimately influences circulating LDL levels.
So the long chain fats have to take this slow, complicated transport network through the body, which leaves them circulating in the blood.
Exactly.
What does the medium chain lauric acid do?
Lauric acid largely bypasses the lymphatic system entirely. It is absorbed straight from the intestines into the portal vein.
Wait, the portal vein, so that acts as a completely different vascular highway in the body?
Exactly. The portal vein is essentially a direct express route straight to the liver. Yeah, and once the lauric acid arrives at the liver, it is rapidly oxidized or burned like you're kindling to produce energy. Because it is utilized for energy so quickly and efficiently, it doesn't enter the systemic circulation in the same way.
Meaning it doesn't just float around causing trouble.
Right. It bypasses the typical lipid transport mechanisms that raise your bad cholesterol.
So the human body literally treats the 94% saturated fat as a completely distinct fuel source from the 66% saturated fat, simply because the chemical chain is just a few carbon atoms shorter.
Precisely. The structural dimensions of the molecule dictate its biological fate. But there is another vital variable highlighted in this text that heavily influences how these fats behave.
And it's not about the chain length.
No, it has nothing to do with chain length. It has to do with how the oil was actually manufactured.
Oh, right.
The researchers didn't just buy the cheapest mass-produced oils on the supermarket shelf. They specifically selected extra virgin coconut oil and extra virgin olive oil.
Which, most people probably just see extra virgin as a marketing buzzword that drives up the price. Why does that processing distinction actually matter on a biological level?
It matters immensely because of what survives the extraction process. Extra virgin coconut oil is typically produced using a cold extraction or a chilling method.
So no heat.
Right, no high heat. It is a gentle mechanical process that preserves the natural plant compounds, specifically phenolic compounds, and it maintains the oil's inherent antioxidant activity.
And how does that compare to standard non-virgin cooking oils, like the cheap stuff?
Standard oils undergo a heavy industrial process known as RBD, which stands for refined, bleached, and deodorized.
It sounds terrible.
It's pretty harsh. Manufacturers use high heat and chemical solvents to extract every last drop of oil, neutralize the flavor, and extend the shelf life. But that intense heat and chemical processing strips away almost all of those beneficial phenolic compounds.
And those antioxidants aren't just there for decoration, right? They have a physiological function.
Absolutely. They actively neutralize free radicals in the blood, preventing the exact lipid oxidation that leads to arterial inflammation.
So it stops the spark we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. The study explicitly notes that variations in health outcomes between different fat sources can often be attributed to the presence or absence of these trace phytochemicals. A refined, bleached fat is biologically distinct from a cold-pressed fat,
Even if the macronutrient label on the back of the bottle looks identical,
even if the labels match perfectly.
which just proves that analyzing food solely by its macronutrient category is a massive oversimplification.
Totally.
But okay, while the portal vein transport and the cold press chemistry elegantly explain the internal mystery of the cholesterol markers, there's a glaring external physical mystery in this trial that we haven't talked about.
Ah, yes, the weight.
Yeah. Adding 50 grams of pure fat to a daily diet should have produced drastic, highly visible effects on the participants' bodies.
You're referring to the laws of thermodynamics, right?
I'm referring to the 13,000 calorie elephant in the room. These people were instructed to consume an additional 450 calories every single day for 4 weeks.
Yep.
Mathematically, 450 extra calories a day multiplied by 28 days yields roughly 13,000 surplus calories over the duration of the study.
That is the math.
And according to standard physiological arithmetic, an extra 13,000 calories should reliably produce about 1 to 2 kilograms of weight gain.
Right. That is the expected outcome if we view the human body as a simple, closed system bomb calorimeter. If you input additional energy and energy expenditure remains constant, your body mass must increase.
But that completely failed to happen here. Like, the data shows that despite eating a massive daily supplement of pure fat, there were absolutely zero significant differences in weight, body mass index, or waist circumference across any of the 3 groups.
It's quite striking.
How did they absorb 13,000 extra calories without gaining a single pound?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of human metabolism, we really have to recognize that the body possesses incredibly sophisticated mechanisms for self-regulation.
Okay, how so?
Because this trial was unblinded and conducted in the real world, the participants were never instructed to reduce their normal food intake to offset the extra oil.
They were just told to live exactly as they had been, plus 3 extra tablespoons of fat.
Right. But the critical mechanism here is satiety.
Satiety, like just feeling full.
Exactly. Dietary fat is exceptionally satiating. It sends powerful chemical signals to the brain that you are full. The gastrointestinal tract responds to high fat intake by releasing satiety hormones, which signal the appetite centers in the brain to just stop eating.
Oh, I see.
So even though the participants weren't consciously trying to diet, adding this dense, high-fat component to their daily routine made them feel so thoroughly full that they subconsciously ate less of everything else.
So the body's internal hormonal thermostat just automatically dialed down their hunger for other foods to compensate for the oil.
Pretty much.
But how do the researchers know they actually ate less, rather than just mysteriously burning it off with a faster metabolism?
Well, they meticulously tracked the participants' dietary habits using an automated digital assessment tool called the DietWebQ.
DietWebQ.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive food frequency questionnaire. And the survey data revealed that their total overall caloric intake barely shifted from their baseline measurements.
Wait, really? Even with the oil?
Even with the oil. By consuming 450 calories of pure fat, they organically displaced roughly 450 calories of other foods, most likely carbohydrates or just incidental snacking, simply because the biological urge to eat wasn't there.
That fundamentally challenges the way most people think about dieting. I mean, it proves that you cannot simply look at food as a mathematical calorie equation.
You really can't.
The chemical form those calories take dictates how your hormones regulate your appetite for the rest of the day.
Furthermore, the researchers monitored their physical activity levels. Across all 3 groups, nearly 80% of the participants reported zero change in their exercise habits.
So we know they weren't secretly running extra miles to burn off the butter or the oil.
Exactly. Their biology just naturally rebalanced their energy intake because the specific macronutrient profile kept them satisfied.
Man. So what does this all mean for you, the person actually trying to navigate the grocery store?
It's a lot to take in.
We have covered some truly complex metabolic ground today. From the portal veins express route to the liver, to the protective power of phenolic compounds, to the fact that forcing 450 calories of fat into a diet didn't result in a single pound of weight gain.
It's a fascinating data set.
It really is. If you are listening to this and you are trying to make informed decisions about your cardiovascular health, the paramount takeaway from this trial is that sweeping generic labels like saturated fat are dangerously inadequate.
They lack the necessary nuance, yeah. When a broad dietary guideline simply commands the public to reduce saturated fat, it completely ignores the massive biological divergence between the medium-chain lauric acid in coconut oil and the long-chain palmitic acid in butter.
The source of the food matters.
Yeah.
And the industrial processing of the food matters immensely. Consuming an extra virgin cold-pressed fat alongside its natural antioxidants is just not physiologically comparable to eating a highly refined, chemically bleached fat.
However, we must provide the responsible clinical context here. The authors of the study are explicit that this 4-week trial does not unilaterally rewrite decades of long-term dietary guidelines.
Right.
This was an intermediate study measuring lipid biomarkers over a single month. It is not a longitudinal study tracking actual heart attack incidence over 20 years. The overarching medical consensus remains that reducing total saturated fat intake and prioritizing unsaturated fats is a sound strategy for cardiovascular health.
Right, so the scientific takeaway is not a license to just start eating butter by the block or deep frying everything in coconut oil.
Exactly. Please don't do that. But what this specific trial rigorously proves is that extra virgin coconut oil behaves much more like heart-healthy olive oil than it does like butter when it comes to regulating your LDL cholesterol and your systemic inflammation.
It's basically a completely different animal.
It is. It strongly suggests that nutrition science needs to evolve past generalized categories and start evaluating the unique individual metabolic profiles of specific fatty acids.
Which really highlights just how nuanced the chemistry of our food actually is. It's not a simple binary of good versus bad.
Not at all.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. We have spent decades obsessing over macronutrient labels, right? Meticulously counting the exact grams of fat, carbs, and protein we consume.
We've all been there.
But if 50 grams of extra virgin coconut oil and 50 grams of butter are both legally classified as saturated fat by regulatory agencies, yet they trigger wildly different effects on your heart, your cholesterol transport, and your inflammatory markers.
It definitely raises a profound question about how we evaluate our diets.
It really does. It makes you wonder, what other foods currently sitting in your pantry right now might actually be misunderstood entirely, or maybe wrongly demonized, just because they were forced into a generic, oversimplified category on the back of the box?